I'm Mary Corcoran, and what I'm going to be showing you now is rotary cutting for quilting. So what we're going to do is start with the fabric that we straightened in the last video, and it's on the mat ready to go. So your fabric is now smooth and straight and flat on your cutting surface, and you're ready to make your first cut. So we're going to start with that cleanup cut that we talked about in the first video, and what we want to do is put the ruler on the edge of the fabric, and we want a longer straight line right along the fold. Then you're going to double check on this end, and because the edge of the fabric can wobble a little bit, we're not going to worry whether or not this is completely straight across here, but we don't want it to be more than 1/8 of an inch off unless you can tell that your fabric is really wobbly on the selvage. But if it's within 1/8 of an inch on this end and completely on the line on the fold end, we're ready to make our cleanup cut. And so we're going to double check that the fabric is completely behind here, and then we're ready to cut. When you've got a longer ruler like this, we want to make sure that the ruler doesn't wobble or move while you're making your cut. So what I typically do is go about 1/3 of the way up the ruler, and I lean into it a little bit. Of course, you're going to be very careful and not let any fingers hang off this side of the ruler. You're going to keep them all completely on the ruler, or maybe even have a couple on the fabric on this side. So once you get that started, you're going to open your cutter and go a little ways up. You don't want to go very much past your hand, because that's when the pressure you're putting on the rotary cutter could force the ruler to move a little bit. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop pressing with the cutter, but not move it, and move my hand up the ruler. Now I can continue my cut, confident that the ruler isn't going to move. Notice I close the cutter when I finish. That's very important. And you can double check that you've got a complete cleanup cut, because the fabric goes from end to end, so you know you haven't lost anything behind the ruler. So now we're ready to go and make the cuts that we need. Now alternatively, if somebody's not interested in dealing with the wobbles that can happen with a long ruler, you can fold your fabric one more time. So what we can do is pull the fabric up from the fold end and match the ends here on the top. And again, just give it a smooth out. Make sure there's no ripples or problems. Now you've got a much shorter distance here to cut, and a shorter ruler will do the job, and you're not going to have to be as concerned about having any wobbles. So again, I want to pick a line on the ruler and put it on this fold, making sure it's completely and accurately on the fold all the way. And I'm going to check up here, and I'm within 1/8 of an inch, so I'm confident that I'm ready to make my cut. Now, it's a much shorter cut and easier to control, and even though it's 4 layers of fabric, if you've got a sharp rotary cutter, that's not a problem at all. One thing, now that I have my cleanup cut, I have to think about cutting the rest of the fabric, and I don't really want to move the fabric. I could either take the fabric and very gently twist it around on the mat so that I can begin cutting, but I want to make sure that I don't disturb the fabric. So I actually prefer to turn the whole mat. I haven't disturbed the fabric at all, so my cleanup cut is now going to stay completely straight, and I'm ready to make my additional cuts. I want to cut some 2.5 inch strips, and this ruler is 12.5 inches wide. If I want to make 5 2.5 inch strips, which is what 12.5 divided by 5 is 2.5, I could make all those cuts with one placement of the ruler, which is actually a little bit more accurate because you're not disturbing the fabric. So I'm going to again put the fabric, or put the ruler right on this fold line. Make sure that the end of it matches the previous cut. And if I cut this fabric here, I can pull this away, and now just pull the ruler back to the 10-inch mark and make a cut. And now I'm going to go to the 7.5. And when I make these additional cuts, what I want to do is double check that I have got this on the line that I'm planning to cut and staying true to the fold line. Because if I want my strips to stay square and not V, that's what I need to be doing. And you can see on this ruler that these little lines at the 7.5 inch place, the black line is on the fabric, but I don't see any green to the left. My left, you're right. And what I want to do is make sure that it stays that way, because that's what's going to give me a truly accurate cut. When you're cutting for larger piecing, where your pieces are 6 inches or larger, that degree of absolute accuracy is probably a little less important. But when you're cutting small pieces, it becomes really critical that you be very accurate. So I try to just achieve that level of accuracy for everything, because I want my piecing to come out the size that I start with my intentions. So the 9 patch is supposed to be 6.5 inches. Accurate cutting is the first step to making sure that it is that. And so we're going to open this one up, and you can see that there's not a V, and it's not a W. We've got a strip.